You said that rioting was the other side of the coin of voting. And as long as the riots were directed at public officials, you just thought that that was the other side of the coin of voting. And now it seems that maybe that's not something you believe.
Assuming you heard some of what's going on and you have some things to say.
No, I didn't hear much. Actually, I don't have much to say. I was actually doing some yard work. I just wanted to say one little question to Destiny, and then I did want to wish you all well on your show. I really hope it does well for you all. So, Destiny, my question to you is: it seems the theme of this show was like talking about standards of behavior based on the title. You said a lot of things that I sort of defended after the first assassination attempt, where I thought you were kind of going on tilt. Now we have a second assassination attempt. I defended a lot of what I thought were jokes that you were telling. I think you make a point that's pretty salient, that there are people that are on the right that make jokes when there's violence against left, so who are they to speak? The one issue, though, that I have, that I would just see if you could have some clarity, we're seeing polling now suggesting up to a quarter of Democrats wish that or think we'd have been better off if that assassination attempt was successful. When Pisco asked you point blank after that first assassination attempt, did you want that bullet to kill Trump? Your answer was basically you paused, and then you said you didn't know what you could say on stream, and then you responded, well, the worst thing that could have happened was someone shooting at him and he lived. So I just want to ask you point blank, I know you don't owe me anything, but seeing as how it was Pisco that asked you originally, did you want Trump to be assassinated? And do you think, seeing as how there's so many Democrats that clearly do want that outcome, that you should be more forceful in condemning that if you actually don't believe that?
I said multiple times that I don't think anybody should advocate for killing politicians or anybody that is publicly protesting in the United States for any political reason. I don't think that's good ever. And I don't think we're at a point where we should be advocating for that ever. But I mean, failed assassination attempts are a boon for the person who is failed to have been assassinated or whatever. That is a political reality. That's true. I think that's a really bad outcome. And whether or not people are doing things that make other people think that they're going to take the country in a direction that would be catastrophic and would result in more harm than any individual being killed or whatever is an opinion that apparently 25% of Democrats have. It's not I don't feel much sympathy on the conservative side right now, given where we're at as a result of everything they've said. So.
But calling for someone's death is one thing. Saying, well, if it happened, I think that would be a good thing is another. So you're ready to say that you would clearly say, no, had Trump been killed, that would have been a bad thing for this country?
I don't know if it would have been a bad thing or not. I think that if you were to poll Republicans on whether or not if they think Kamala or Joe Biden being killed, I don't know where they'd be at, considering how many of them believe in satanic death cults or whatever, or QAnon. But I wouldn't call for anybody to be killed. I think that would be really bad. I think it would set a really bad precedent in the United States.
I think it would be a bad thing and I think that this deserves an answer, because just in terms of where the country is at, if you think that there's like a bunch of a split in the country and a lot of partisan inner fighting, that kind of thing. And when you're in a situation where you have a lot of crazies, in my opinion, on the MAGA side, I don't think that it does anyone any good to have the democratic process short-circuited either by Trump or by an assassin's bullet. I think that's not good for this country.
Yeah, and Destiny, I think with you, I get the whataboutism. I get that there are people on the right that'll be psychotic and deep down would say, yeah, I want our opponents to be killed. It's certainly not me. I've been forceful calling against all political violence. But with you, it's like oftentimes I feel like you say something in the heat of the moment, and then later when you have a cooler head, you sort of walk back. So one of the first times I talked to you during the George Floyd riots, you said that rioting was the other side of the coin of voting. And as long as the riots were directed at public officials, you just thought that that was the other side of the coin of voting. And now it seems that maybe that's not something you believe. And I think, I don't care. I'm not blaming anyone for what.
Wait, when have I said that's not something I don't believe in rioting?
No, I think you seem to have talked back the riots of George Floyd. You've said, to me, you've said, how could you say that I was for them? I had so many people on the left that were furious of me for sticking up for Rittenhouse. So it seems like you've given a mixed message. I'll ask you point blank. Do you think that rioting's the other side of the coin of voting, as if you did the first time you talked to me about this?
I don't know if I said, if I've ever believed that rioting is the other side of voting. I know that activism and protesting, and it can be rioting, can be another side of voting, that activist things like this. Somebody said, Destiny, you've already debated him on this and you already debunked it. Was that not my original quote? I don't remember what my original quote was.
I could put the original. Yeah, that's fine.
Sure,
you didn't debunk it. That was the original quote. You said that. But I'll leave you, the point I'm trying to make is...
accusation in that original debate and you looked it up after. Justin, Brandon, can you type in my original quote then? I'm pretty sure what I've said consistently is that if people want to riot, I don't think I've ever supported private businesses being attacked ever. I don't think at any point at the height of my progressivism, liberalism, whatever, I don't think I've ever supported private businesses being attacked.
I think that's fair, Justin, but he's not accusing you of that. I don't think.
No.
Well, I don't know, but then I think I said if you are going to protest, if you are going to riot, I think you can probably make arguments for rioting or being destructive of public property, because at the very least you're directing the anger and destruction or whatever at the public facilities that you feel have failed you. But I mean, in general, rioting doesn't work for a variety of reasons.
That would be kind of a case-by-case basis where you wouldn't necessarily agree as applied in a given situation if you didn't agree with that it were the right means.
Yeah,
well,
I disagree for several reasons, but not for the moral reason. I would disagree. One is because I don't think it's generally very effective, number one. Number two, I would probably disagree as applied because I tend to disagree on the issues that people are rioting for. But I find it really hard that, like, I mean, what's Finkelstein's favorite fucking example? Is the Nat Turner slave rebellion or whatever? I'm pretty sure they just went and they killed like innocent people there. Like, I don't think they were all slave owners. But it's harder in situations where there are insane injustices to where it's like, okay, well, fuck, maybe in some circumstances I can understand it. I've said in the January 6th stuff that if there was really solid evidence, if it was good evidence,
you would
that,
be
like,
in favor of January 6th if it were.
Yeah, I think it would be incredibly queer as an American citizen to say that you have a principled stance against insurrection or something, given the foundation of our country. Like, I think that you kind of have to have that baked in a little bit, but it was going to come down to what the issue is.
I just want to give some credit to Rob. I think that Rob is generally very, very against political violence, and I think that this disconnect has to do with a little bit of Destiny's, like, kind of being incredibly specific. I think Rob is saying at no point is political violence justified.
Correct.
That it's not exactly true that you would say that. I think that there are situations where you would envision it, but it's not useful to talk about them or to say anything other than political violence is never justified.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. But I think that Destiny's being, like, strictly speaking, precisely correct when he says, for example, and I think that I'm not even sure I disagree with him, like, if the election were actually stolen and we actually had, like, very, very, very strong proof of that, that to me, you know, isn't certain things justified, right? Don't you understand in the head of a Jan 6er, right?
No, it wouldn't be justified even in that case.
Yeah.
There are certainly times in history, for every one time we could say that political violence was justified, there's 10,000 times that people have made that excuse and it wasn't. I think in today's world, because there are so many other options, that even if the worst things that people thought about the election was being stolen, I don't think that justifies rioting. I think morally it's not justified because it's a better chance or there's avenues for sort of fighting through the area of ideas and knowledge as opposed to physical violence. And also strategically, it doesn't apply. And the problem is...
so was the Revolutionary War, was that justified?
Yes, but that was literally declaring war to separate ourselves. If the argument's going to be that, you know...
Well, then was the Civil War justified?
That's like political violence, right?
Well, again, I'll repeat this. Like, Piska already gave the answer to this. Yes, you could point to a few times in history where political violence was justified. The situation back then was vastly different than it is today. So we have so much more battles are fought through information now, not so much through physical violence. And the problem is, if I were to say to you, sure, I guess there's a time where political violence will be justified, every single person with an issue says, yes, and this issue is mine. Systemic racism. See, we can't go through the systems because they're all racist. Therefore, we're justified in violence. All the police are killing unarmed black men, so we could light the country on fire. These are things we saw. And
this is a huge pivot. This is a huge pivot. I'm just curious. I don't know. Would you agree then that the justification for the Second Amendment to fight against the tyranny of the government, that's a wholly unsatisfying answer?
No, because it's to prevent excesses from the government where the government would come at you. Secondly, what the purpose
but you would
of that
agree
would
that every single time where the government come after you should never use violence, right?
No, not necessarily. Like, if you're defending yourself, that's different than proactively going and causing a riot. So, for example,
it wouldn't be like political violence, then it would be kind of like a civil libertarian self-defense kind of thing.
Right. Okay. So correct. So, like, if the government comes into your house to take your children away because you're practicing Judaism, yes, you have a right to use those arms to defend yourself.
Okay, but government wants you to leave your house, so they cut off all the utilities to your block.
That's the kind of problem I'm having.
It's more of that would be more of a case for self-defense than something such as, I think the election was stolen. And the problem is, like, and again, Destiny, get to the specifics of this, you may misremember what you said, and I sympathize with the fact that You're probably somewhat hyperbolic just because it gets more clicks, and I think it's somewhat in who you are. I'm sort of the same way, and you're speaking 8 hours a day, damn near every day. So you're going to say stuff that maybe flies off the cuff sometimes that's not the most wise stuff. But when I hear over and over, like the first time I talked to you, I'm saying things like, hey, maybe it's a conspiracy theorist in me, but I think that these Democratic mayors and governors are allowing these riots to occur. You say that's not a conspiracy at all. That's what's happening, and rioting's the other side of the coin of voting. He did. I have the clips. I mean, he said that stuff, and then later when it's like, or we could have, there's a litany of examples like this where this stuff was said, and it only matters to me because I think some of your audience, just like some of my audience, just like some of Pisco's audience, and others, some of the audience is pretty impressionable. So like, I've seen people send clips from your Reddit, Destiny, that's like, well, since the Supreme Court basically made Trump God Emperor, we tried to use the legal avenues, so now maybe it's appropriate to go outside the scope of that. And I just think it's playing with fire. It's cool. You want to make jokes about Corey Competore? I think they fucking suck, but you have the right to do that. I'm not going to clutch my pearls over it. But when you're specifically asked by Pisco, not by Piers Morgan or someone you could give two shits about, but by Pisco, and you're like, but clearly you didn't want the bullet to kill Trump, right? And you're like, well, like, I think that sets a very bad precedent, particularly if your first spaces here is going to be about standards for behavior.
Listen. I first of all, I think the space is a little broad, and that has to do with like I agree. There's something about standards of behavior, but I do want to say I agree, Rob, in the sense that I think the correct answer is it would be the worst outcome. But I don't think that we should conclude from his answer, which is a little bit more equivocal, and he was kind of thinking it through out loud in real time and trying to work it out in his head. I don't think that we should conclude from that he wanted violence to happen to Donald Trump, or that he would encourage it. And I do think that, you're going to find some crazy BGGers for sure. But are you going to find Destiny encouraging violence, political violence in his clips? I don't know about that either.
Well, let me be clear.
Yeah.
The only reason I would agree to talk to anyone is I think there has to be a precursor agreement that we're not going to call for violence against the other or for their politicians or whatever. So I defended Destiny and think, for me, I have a bias that I stream because I'm entertained by it, and I don't want to talk to people that I think want me to be harmed or want to call for violence. So I gave the benefit of the doubt that that's not what Destiny was doing, and that's why I just asked for him to clear it up, because that was the only comment that I heard in the aftermath of that. Look, I think that I sympathize, as you know, Pisco, of conversations I've had. When Pisco asked me, Rob, will you say if Trump wins, you'll condemn him using FISA warrants illegally to spy on his opponents? And I say, fuck you, Pisco. I'm not going to, I don't owe you anything because you didn't say shit to my level that I thought was appropriate when that happened against Trump. So when Destiny says to Piers Morgan, I don't owe you shit, when Piers says, well, you condemn this, I get that. I actually sympathize with that. But when you asked him, that's different. And that's the one time that my eyebrows raised where I was like, I'm still giving Destiny the benefit of the doubt, but I just wanted to hear it from his own mouth. Look, I was heated in that moment. Yeah, okay, maybe I was being a little jokey or whatever, but clearly I wouldn't want Trump to be assassinated.
I'll listen to this again afterwards. I'm just, because I can only read the transcript because I can't listen when you guys are talking, but I'm just reading the transcript. That's affecting political change like this is fine. Like, that's part of the goal. Like, activism and riots are one side of the coin, and the other side is voting. Like, bringing awareness to issues like this, and attempting people to vote differently is part of the goal, right? So I can listen to this afterwards. It doesn't sound like I'm defending like violent rioting, burning down cities. It sounds like I'm talking.
But let me be clear. You specifically say you're against the burning down of private property. I've never accused you otherwise.
Wait. What were you just saying that my quote was about then?
Your quote
about the precinct.
It's about the precinct. It's about the public buildings. You said there. You just read in that quote. You said that like, activism and rioting's the other side of the coin to voting. And what you made it clear, you're not talking about burning down someone's private building or looting, but you are talking about the public institutions that were being attacked. And you said, yeah, that's sort of the other side of the coin of voting.
Wait, when have I ever said, first of all, that's, when you say, yeah, that's the other side of the coin of voting, like I'm saying that, like, yes, every time you vote, you should also burn down a police precinct or whatever, is not, that's a bit of a false equivalency. But number two, wait, when have I ever said anything different to this?
But that's your quote. What did you mean by that then? What do you think you meant when you said rioting and activism's the other side of the coin of voting? What do you think you meant when you said that?
Well, I'm saying the coin and the other side is voting, like bringing awareness to issues like this, and attempting people to vote differently is part, and getting people to vote differently is part of the goal. If we're looking at it in a political calculus, I
can interpret it one of like, I think, three ways. The first one is I could say that this is what happens when like voting systems are ineffective. That could be a commentary, like not necessarily a normative thing, but him just explaining what occurs in the absence of like proper, responsiveness to the electorate. He could be saying that it's possible to justify in certain situations, though maybe not necessarily in this one, political violence if there's a certain level of urgency or a certain level of, like he just mentioned, the slave rebellion. Or third, he could be saying, actually, I do agree that they should have burned down, or it was okay or not wrong for them to burn down the police building in Minneapolis. Of those three, Stephen, I guess, which one would you most align with, or something else?
You know what? Give me like 2 minutes. I'm just gonna go listen to it. Hold on.
And let me just say, like, I think this is a bit of a stretch, though, Pisco. Like, for example, let's say you called into my show January 7th, 2020, and you're like, holy shit, Rob, did you see that stuff that happened yesterday? And I said, well, sometimes violence and rioting are the other side of the coin of voting, and, you have to bring awareness to the issues you're talking about. Would you have given me the benefit of the doubt to be like, oh, what Rob's talking about's in the abstract? Sometimes, no, you would be like, dude, we're talking about this specific incident. I call in and I'm talking to Destiny about, it's like literally the day 4 of the George Floyd riots. That's what we're talking about. And that's the context of him making that comment. Now, I understand my interpretation. He said, if it goes later, he's like, if it goes on a little, I said, how long could this be allowed to go on? He's like, any much longer, and I would be against it, which he does say that. And I've been clear the whole time. He never said he supported burning down private businesses. But for someone like me, whose issue was, listen, they're not just burning down private businesses. It seems that they're using sort of the threat of violence and actual violence occurring to sort of try to make some sort of political movement. And we should condemn those efforts at violence. And I see almost every institution in this country either downplaying, make excuses for, or celebrating that violence. And when Destiny says like, well, that's the other side of the coin. And as I said, he could check the transcripts. By the way, where's the loser that said this was debunked? Where are you at, asshole? Man, some of you DGGers, you're such sycophants, you can't even call
All right. Leave him alone. Listen, my recollection is it's possible Destiny made that statement, and it's possible he meant that. And it's possible also to change your mind. I mean, I don't know, because I'm not watching the video right now. It could be that he was saying it was justified, but very clearly, and in a short amount of time, he said, all this shit needs to stop, and he got banned on Twitch for doing so. And so I will, if he said that, I don't agree with it, and I'm sure that I would have challenged him on it. And I think that the analog to January 6th, though, I think, and I don't know if you agree with this, Rob, actually, that January 6th was way worse, and one could make a distinction based on the magnitude of harm or potential harm to our democratic institutions and distinguish them that way. I do agree that there's a potential to have a hypocrisy there. But I think in short order, he was very much against the violence of BLM and supporting Joe Biden, who was against the violence, which was also not just private, also public. And so, if he said it, I disagree with it.
Here's the deal. Obviously, all of us, if you're any kind of human, you're going to be fallible, you're going to make mistakes. And I think it's actually a good trait to later admit, like, hey, I've changed my mind on something. Now, not everything. If you constantly flip-flop on everything, then you probably don't have a good core reason for it. But of course, we should give some, exemption to everyone's going to change their mind on some things. But calculations of things like political violence are different. I think that it should be easy to universally condemn this sort of stuff. And for me, it comes across sometimes as hollow when I see people. Obviously, I'm biased as someone who comes from the right wing, and I think that we've seen far more political violence on the left since 2016. But nonetheless, it could occur on the other side as well, and I'll admit that. In fact, I was talking to a defense attorney last night, and we were talking about the Tyreek Hill situation. I think it's funny that you'll have so many people on the right that are like, if the FBI knocks at your door, tell them to F off and don't give them any information. But when Tyreek Hill winds up his window, people are like, well, you should just cooperate. He got what was coming. I get that frustration. It's like, it seems to be somewhat of a contentious issue, a little tension there. So when I hear Destiny repeatedly, like in a moment, say like, violence, and then later be like, well, that's not what I really meant. Probably, I think that he was being hyperbolic in the moment when he said that, but it doesn't come across as a good trend as far as I'm concerned, particularly when I think that one of the core strategies that your side has and that's argued about quite often on like you, Josiah, and Destiny Spaces are sort of the rhetoric and sort of the dangers of what MAGA stands for. when your rhetoric, like, why isn't that same standard applied to your side? For God's sake.
I think it's.
Go ahead.
I want to let Stephen respond for sure, but I just want to be clear. I think any comparisons of rhetoric, it's not even close, in my opinion, in terms of
It's
MAGA
not. You're right.
and
It's
like mainstream Democrats or Destiny. I think that's an absurd
It's not
comparison. But I
even-
want to let Stephen respond.
Oh, if he's ready. How could you say that? It's not even close. So wait,
I very easily say that. Yeah.
So for example, if I would say the people that have rhetoric, we're talking about rhetoric that could possibly incite someone towards acts of violence, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. I would say that for people on the left thinking that the former president and possible future president is a Nazi would have to be very high up there, or thinking that he would end democracy as we know it would have to be very high up there. As far as like insightful rhetoric, whether it's true or not, just rhetoric that could inflame passions that would cause, I would think saying that the Supreme Court
No
is.
way you believe this. You think about the focus on Democrat messaging has been completely on voting, completely on
true,
turning
though.
out to vote. 100% it
That's
is.
not true.
All the main-
They're the number one, probably the number one attack against Trump is he's a threat to democracy.
It's true. I'm going to say it because it's true.
What does it matter if it's true or not? We're talking about whether or not it could be insightful.
It's possible that some people, I'm not saying that it's impossible, some people could be incited to violence based on that rhetoric, though keep in mind, though, I'm using the term incite in the more broad sense, not the legal definition of incitement.
Well, I understand that, and
clear about that.
We're going to disagree on whether it's true or not, right? And so this is the problem I see. You'll point out Trump rhetoric, and people on Trump's side will say, "But that's true. Democrats do want to take your guns. Democrats do want open borders. Democrats do hate white people, or they hate Christians."
Let's talk about that. So you tell me the truth. Do you think that the statement about the Haitians being rapists, illegal immigrants, stealing pets, eating cats and dogs, that kind of thing, would you put that on probably similar levels, much, much, much lower than Trump is a threat to democracy? How do you view those things in comparison to each other?
I would say that in the context of one's against a public figure, I put less harm on it. So attacking a public figure, I actually think is like, if, for example, if I was to say Nancy Pelosi is a Satanist, right? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying hypothetically. That's probably less egregious than saying my neighbor's a Satanist or my neighbor's.
You understand how ridiculous this sounds when like Donald Trump is literally calling Joe Biden a threat to democracy, literally calling them Comrade Kamala, calling them communists. Like
let me finish. Let me finish.
Come on.
So I'm sort of. You do this all the time. Like I'm kind of trying to like give an olive branch to you, and you step on my toes. So yeah, in that context, like if you're an individual Haitian, yeah, like you're just some random person, like being smeared like this, whether it be true or not, would be more harmful, and in ways it's more egregious. However, in the context of politics, I think that if I'm an objective, like neutral person, and I don't like either candidate really, let's just say hypothetically, and I think one candidate, I'm like, it's bad he's saying that Haitians are eating cats, right? And on the other hand, I'm like, I think it's bad that they're literally calling Trump a Nazi lover and Hitler. Like, for example, the Fine People hoax, probably one of the most insightful, dangerous hoaxes in the history of this country. Yeah. What would you really do if you thought the president of the United States literally was saying, I like Nazis?
He was literally equivocating, and you know this to be the truth, that there was no, and you're going to point to like one hearsay person, that there was no confirmation that person is there. The notion that there were fine people on both sides is an incorrect notion, and the fact that he gives a self-serving cleanup statement afterwards is par for the course for Donald Trump. And
he did not. Look, how many speeches did he give after Charlottesville where he referenced it?
Where he referenced fine people?
How many speeches did he reference the Charlottesville?
I have no idea.
Well, let me educate you, since you've apparently bought the hoax. He gave 3 speeches. He gave one speech, I believe it was the night of or the night after. And in that speech, he said, much like you hear Democrats say anytime there's an assassination attempt, which seems quite frequent against Republicans at this point, they'll say, all rhetoric needs to calm down on both sides. And we love this country and hate doesn't apply. We won't accept
it. You hate it when Dems do it, right? You hate it when Dems do it?
No, not necessarily. I think that what I hate about the Democrats is they consistently blame right-wing rhetoric when a right-winger does something, but when a left-winger does it, they say both sides need to tone down the rhetoric. That's been the standard since the Gifford shooting, and then we saw the Steve Scalise shooting. All of the Democrats during the Gifford shooting said, Bernie Sanders was fundraising off of it. Right-wing rhetoric is making it so it's not even safe to walk down the street as a Democrat. And then when a Bernie supporter shoots Republicans and Steve Scalise, all of a sudden when Nancy Pelosi's asked, do you blame your rhetoric. She goes, how dare you? She yells at the journalist. How dare you imply that? In fact, it was Trump's rhetoric, we were told, or Republican rhetoric that was responsible for the Republican ball field shooting. And the difference is, this is coming from people in positions of power. Yes, Trump's in a position of power, but overarchingly, these institutions such as journalists, etc., they repeat this rhetoric, which is fine. I'm not blaming them for stochastic terrorism or anything. But how can they get on their high horse then and blame Trump and couples for his rhetoric? So much so we have Lester Holt the day of another Trump assassination attempt, and his monologue that day is like, assassination attempt of Donald Trump. This comes days after he incites violent rhetoric against Haitians. Like, get the fuck out of here. If that was a Democrat that was just an assassination attempt, do you think for a second?
The Haitian thing is absolutely insane.
It's not that insane.
It's not insane.
It's not that insane. What it is he is talking about there is a problem there. There are crimes that are going up because Haitians. There are resources that are being taken. There are people in Springfield, Ohio, Charleroi, Pennsylvania, and other places that are being inundated with mass fluxes intentionally by this administration of people from foreign countries that have significant differences from us. But what happens is the same thing that's happened with Trump since 2016. He'll talk about something that's a kernel of truth, but he unfortunately listens to people that he's following on social media.
There's a kernel of truth to his claims about Haitians eating pets.
Let me finish. I believe there's a kernel of truth about sort of things that are going on, crimes that that are occurring with Haitians. There were public. Please let me finish. There were public claims of people that were publicly claiming in town council meetings and elsewhere on social media that there were pets that were coming up missing and possibly being eaten by Haitians. What happens is Trump takes something that no one gives a shit about the people of Springfield, Ohio. No one. You didn't. The Democrats didn't. Harris didn't. Biden might, but he's just concerned about eating ice cream or porridge or whatever. He's at least talking about it. His team's at least talking about it. JD Vance is right.
Wait. Why? Just because you care? Wait. Why would we ever think that repeating claims made in a city council town hall thing or whatever, why is that acceptable?
Why not? Why is it acceptable?
Because you have no evidence. Because you have no evidence of them, right?
Well, no. I think I agree with you. If we're talking about best possible practices, it's difficult to say anything until you have definitive proof.
Wait. No. Hold on. You generalize that so much. Also, hold on. Before I go down this road, just real quick, what was your claim that what I had said in this debate or whatever that we had 4 years ago?
I said that you said some of the following things. You said that rioting was the other side of the coin of voting. You admitted at one point. I said I think. Okay,
so at the end of this debate, I'm saying that if people feel like their voices aren't being heard and they're trying to get legislation passed or whatever, that activism and rioting might be the other side of that. I don't think in this debate you ask me about riots and what they're going on. What's happening right now. 3 minutes before that quote, I tell you that there's been way too much right now. That there's been the riots against private businesses aren't okay. But I'm just describing.
You keep going back. Let me be clear, Destiny, for the millionth time. I have never once, to my knowledge, ever accused you of saying riots against private property was okay. What I was talking about was it seemed that you were delineating, which is good. It is bad to riot against private property. But you seem to be speaking in the real moment, like day 4, whenever we had this discussion of the Floyd riots. You were like, well, sometimes rioting's the other side of the coin to voting. Now that seems like an equivalent, and you're like, clearly I don't mean the private property, and it sounds to me.
Wait. But when I say it's the other side of voting, this is basically the equivalent of that MLK quote that rioting is the language of the unheard. That if people feel and that's what we're talking about. Because at the end of this, right after, I ask you well, do you think legislation is going to get passed? Do you think that people feel like their voices are being heard? Do you think something's going to change or whatever?
Mm-hmm. So it sounds to me like you're giving some sort of credence to the idea that the riots will accomplish something good, or that there was justification for the riots.
Something, they can. But I mean, we all agree with that, right?
Well, let me rephrase. All right, fair enough, right? But it seems that you're giving some sort of lip service to a justification of riots, saying, well, maybe it'll get legislation passed. Maybe this is a way to raise awareness.
Earlier, though, that the rioting that's happened so far, there's been too much. It's not good.
Against the private, you were talking specifically about the private businesses.
Sure, correct? But I don't know. We don't go over any explicit attacks against any public infrastructure here to see if I agree or disagree with it.
But it seems like in a world where we both understand, for example, this is coming right off 2-3 days after the burning down of a police precinct. When we're having this conversation and you are the one who brings the delineation, you're like, well, clearly I'm against rioting of private property. The obvious inference there is you're differentiating private property from public property. And then when you go on to say, well, sometimes it's the voice of the unheard, or it's the other side of the coin to voting. It seems to any objective person that's listening, it seems that Destiny's saying well, if you have to riot to get your voice heard, at least make it against public things, and sometimes that could raise awareness. Is that
Rob,
unfair?
this is a 2-hour conversation. If you have to infer that much from one comment, you're probably in the wrong.
So
right? Like, this is a 2-hour conversation. I don't know if I ever justify any individual attack. I think I just say, or I know I do just say, because I just listen to all this stupid shit. At the end, they're like, yeah, activism and rioting are the other side of the coin. And historically, in the United States, yeah, there have been activists and there have been riots or whatever. I don't know which ones I would support or which ones I wouldn't. We go over specific details. We don't go over a specific one in this conversation, but it's a 2-hour conversation. Why would you take where I'm just describing at the end the people riot or whatever because they feel like they're going to have legislative changes or whatever as some kind of justification for me for why riots happen? This is a thing that happens.
Because if you ask me to condemn violence from like Charlottesville, I'd say absolutely I condemn the violence. I wouldn't say, well, any violence against private individuals would be wrong. However, sometimes violence the other side of the coin to voting, and it can raise awareness issues. And do you think we'll get some legislation?
I didn't say that. I didn't say that in response to, do you condemn the firefighter or the whatever police thing from me? I didn't say that in response to that. Do you even ask me in this debate to condemn or to have a stance specifically on the fire or on the police station?
I don't know if I use the words I'm asking you to condemn, but I'm clearly talking about the riots that we see happening at that time, which those riots were like in
but wait, if you say you clearly see the riots happening at the time, I say in here that, yeah, the way too much has happened. This isn't acceptable. It isn't good. But then we're talking about whether or not, funnily enough, a conversation we just had like an hour earlier, you were asking me like, why are they letting cities burn? And my responses in this debate were, well, I think that cops just can't manage everything immediately. You can't just send in a bunch of cops. Things will escalate. Like, that's probably why it's happening. So it's not like I'm championing even.
You also directly said when I said, I think that these governors or mayors are allowing this to occur, you said, absolutely, that's not a conspiracy at all. That's what you say, correct?
Wait, yes, but I say that in that they're allowing it to happen because it's like part of the police
de-escalation, like,
yes,
tactics.
Because that's what we argue about, like, immediately after.
I'll go back and look at the quote. I thought I specifically said that they were allowing it to
occur
because
I don't know how much de Blasio city burning, but I'm pretty sure riots are being okay. You said, I will be happy to have that soundbite that you're admitting that de Blasio is allowing his city to burn because he thinks. And then I say afterwards, I don't know how much de Blasio is allowing his city. But I'm pretty sure riots are being allowed to burn to some extent in every major city because you can't just send in the cops and the National Guards to destroy everybody and get everything. You have to let people like burn themselves out. Not a little, right? And then you said, well, I just think that's outrageous. I think it's up. Would you say? And then I'm just reading the transcript.
Okay. And Rob, this is going to bring it back to the actual conversation. I appreciate that you're trying to like get a statement from Destiny in the past, and I understand people are frustrated because it's kind of turned into a cross-examination of his previous statements, but I would like, if we can, we're about to transition to closing it out. We're closing at 5, but here we have a situation that we were just talking about where there's a tactic that you're saying is deplorable, that is letting these things burn out or taking a kind of not immediately violent approach to some of these protesters. Yes. Didn't Donald Trump preside over this? Doesn't Donald Trump also face some kind of culpability for the BLM and letting it get out of hand? If you're going to say that it was deplorable to let these cities burn out, that it's a national problem sufficient for you to bring it up, 4 years later all the time, like, isn't it also his responsibility for failing to take federal action against a national problem?
Well, what was going on was, I believe I say in that quote with Destiny, I don't have the transcript in front of me, that I think that the Democrats are allowing this to occur because they see it as politically advantageous. My theory on that is they wanted Trump to be the dictator that they constantly claimed he was. So what would have happened, as you well know, is once he requested to send the National Guard in and all these Democratic places like in Kenosha said, no, we refuse to have it, they wanted him to then have an emergency declaration that would have forced it in beyond them so that they could have said, see, he's a dictator. Is
there a single statement from any lawmaker, anybody, anywhere, any kind of statement that even implies that?
It implies that they were refusing to accept the National Guard?
That implies that they were hoping he would do it so that they could showcase how corrupt he was.
Well, of course they didn't say that. I'm saying that that's my theory, that what was going on.
You have evidence for that theory?
Yes, I have evidence for that theory because they allowed this violence to occur over and over again when they clearly had a police force. No, he didn't. Let me finish. Right? They allowed it when they clearly had a domestic police force. Then when Trump suggested using the normal means that you would use, which was requesting that they allow the National Guard to come in, they turned it down. For example, in New York, I don't read minds, though it is funny. This is coming from the group of people that think that Donald Trump engaged in an insurrection, claiming that they know when he was saying, let me finish, knowing when he said, be peaceful, that he really meant be violent.
Wait. Why would he refuse the National Guard? Why wouldn't the governors just say, fine, bring them in, and then say, look at what Trump is doing?
That's a great question. Why didn't they? Because if they accepted the help, then it would be hard to call him a tyrant. But if he sent them in against their wishes, then they could say he's mobilizing the military against domestic people. These are people protesting against racism, and Donald Trump is a racist and an authoritarian who, against the wishes of local government, is sending in the military. That would have been the argument. And that was the argument you would have made.
You'll never admit this, but this is an all roads lead to Rome fallacy, because if they would have allowed the federal government, or they would have allowed the National Guard to come in, they would have only needed one bad thing to happen. And if one cop would have killed, one federal officer would have killed one citizen, then the Democrats would say, wow, look, the federal police are so horrible under Donald Trump. And then you would have said, see, that's exactly why they allowed Trump to mobilize the National Guards, because they knew that at least one bad thing would happen. And now they're going to blame Donald Trump for it. Like, no matter what they do, you're going to say there was a
That's
massive
not true at
conspiracy.
all. That's not true at all. And in that world, like, it's very difficult to liken one bad person at the National Guard that takes a heinous action when he's been requested in by a Democratic mayor and sent by Donald Trump.
Just to check, didn't this literally exactly happen? Weren't there cities where there were National Guard people deployed and some people were quote unquote disappearing and people blamed Trump for it? Didn't this actually happen?
But it didn't stick as much
anywhere. You can't say yes, but that means that what you just said was wrong. How can you agree with
not
those
true?
statements?
That's not true, right? What happened was there were places that accepted the National Guard, and there were accusations that the Guard behaved improperly. But did it lead to some huge political calculus against Donald Trump, the likes of what it would have been if he would have sent the military in against the wishes? Because it's obvious, and you can ignore and know that this is again. And not only that, I could even prove
Can I
it.
ask Rob a quick question?
Let me real quick, Josiah, and then real quick. We actually had
Bob say something, and then just ask your
15
question.
seconds. 15 seconds. We actually have people in the military like Miley and others that were talking about optics being a reason not to send the National Guard in January 6th. The idea that they would have been okay with him overriding the wishes of Democratic governors and mayors if he would have sent them in is laughable. You know they would have made that criticism. You all personally would have made the criticism that meant he was a tyrant.
But you don't actually have. I want to let Josiah ask, but you don't actually have evidence that was their intent, other than the fact that they didn't request National Guard.
No, if you're asking me if I have the power to get illegal FISA warrants to spy on politicians I don't like the Democrats do, no, I don't have that.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so my question, because I could have missed it, but Rob, you were asked if Trump bared responsibility, if he had some sort of culpability, if he should have sent the National Guard in anyway. And I didn't hear yes or no.
Yes.
He did?
He should have sent the National Guard in. Yeah, absolutely. He should have taken.
Even though that's what they wanted, even though it was a bait?
Yes, that's what he should have did. Sometimes being a good leader means that you have to do what's right, even if you know that it'll be used to politically attack you.
Okay.
That's one of Trump's failings. Absolutely will agree with that.
And you know what?
No. That's
one of our show.
You could go back. I'll say real quick. I said it. I lost friends over this because I'm more of like a small government person, and I had friends telling me, "Oh my God, what happened to the Rob that criticized excessive police with us marching in 2004, 2005 against things like the Patriot Act?" I didn't want that. What I wanted was the rioting to stop. I wanted the media to put a focus on how terrible the riots were. I wanted the Democrats to speak up about how terrible they were. I didn't want Kamala Harris to promote a bail fund. I didn't want Democrats to keep saying what needs to keep happening up to and through the election. I wanted local governors and mayors to actually deploy their domestic police force to handle it. But given that all of that wasn't occurring, before Rittenhouse occurred, I said, you know what's going to happen? They're setting up the situation where it'll be like roof Koreans, where we're going to have Americans shooting other Americans. And I want that to stop at all causes. And so if that means temporarily deploying the National Guard as limited as possible to stop these riots, that's what should occur. And Trump should have done
on January 6th, right? So in January 6th, he should have not listened to, just like he should have not listened
Absolutely agree. I think that it would have been better for Donald Trump to not listen before January 6th when people like Miley told him not to deploy 10,000 National Guard. He should have went against his wishes, which you and all the Democrats would have said was authoritarian and was, quote, a Reichstag moment, which is what Miley said. And I think even the day of January 6th, he should have gone against what his people that he put on the ground, such as the Sergeant of Arms and the military people.
Also, just to be clear, if he would have deployed them, yes, it would have been authoritarian. The reason that he gave was authoritarian. He said that he wanted the National Guard people there to protect his people.
That's fine.
So
what?
He didn't say no. Because the National Guard isn't supposed to be deployed to the Capitol to protect rioters at the Capitol. It's supposed to be deployed to protect the Capitol. When Donald Trump said that he wanted 10,000 troops there, he said he wanted them to protect his people.
The reason that he was the reason that he was saying that was because people like you on the left exhibited over and over again that when Trump and MAGA people got together for political purposes, oftentimes they were attacked by outside agitators. This occurred over and over and over. See Portland with the Patriot Prayer people that were constantly attacked. So Trump was worried that his people were going to come peacefully make their voices heard, and a bunch of left-wingers were going to come beat the shit out of them, and that happened over and over again. So he said, I want the National Guard there. The idea that had the Guard been there, they'd have been like, oh, we'll allow the MAGA people to storm the Capitol.
Pivots, all red herrings.
It's not pivot or red herring?
Originally, you said that you implied that he wanted the National Guard there to protect the Capitol for some noble purpose. He didn't want them there.
Where did I say the words noble purpose? You could read minds now?
Because you said that, you guys would have said that if he came there, it would have been for authoritarian
reasons. That's right. You would have.
The flip side would be, and that is if he's planning on having a protest there to protest the certification of the vote because he thinks the election is stolen, and he wants the National Guard there to protect his protesters who think the election was stolen, that's not a good deployment of the National Guard. That's exactly the type of situation that they were trying to prevent.
The Guard should have been deployed anyways. It was only because the downplaying and the false, I would say, intentionality of organizations like the FBI and other intelligence agencies that knew that there was likely to be some conflict there.
The FBI intended January 6th. That is your position, fair?
I believe that they, much like the Whitmer kidnapping case, that they were talking to people that they knew were inspiring people to possibly engage in acts of violence. They had people on the ground. They knew that it was going to occur to some degree. They facilitated that occurring so that they could use an excuse to crack down on people later, just like with the Whitmer situation.
And what's the one single example of evidence for this? One piece of evidence for this?
Well, for example, we can go to the testimony of Capitol Chief Sund, who talks repeatedly about how he requested the National Guard beforehand. He wasn't given proper intelligence.
You said that the federal police, the federal agencies were instigating that they wanted this to happen. I said, what's one single piece? Because there are hundreds of thousands of protesters that day. One single piece of evidence. Did it come out in any of the Proud Boys or the Oath Breakers testimony, any of their convictions, any of their court stuff? Was there any piece of evidence whatsoever for any of these people that supports the idea that the feds were operating here to instigate this event?
Yes. Ready? You ready? In those trials, did the FBI testify that they had regular contact with those groups such as Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and elsewise, and knew that they were going to attempt to have an overthrow of the government? Yes or no?
No, I don't think they did.
I'm not aware of that.
Okay, so then what did they testify as such?
They testified. Wait. In which trials are you talking about?
So I believe the Oath Keepers specifically, right? Though it might have been with Tario and them and the Proud Boys. There is testimony to the fact that they had people that were aware, and there's statements that they've given, that they heard their insiders that were given, that they planned on possibly bringing guns, and they planned on possibly overthrowing the government to some extent.
What you just said. So the fact that they would possibly have rumors or they have information they would possibly bring guns, that's possible. The FBI, by the way, passed along a threat assessment to a general email. I forget which one it is. They were passing along threat assessments. And so I don't understand how
for example, we know that Miley was doing his own intelligence and had intelligence that later came out that said that he thought that it was going to get violent. The FBI had many threat assessments and many specific assessments. They only set a general one, and that was sent to basically the intelligence person at the Capitol. Let me finish.
The DOD relies on the FBI and other internal police forces to get their information. General Milley, I think is who you're referring to.
Yes.
He doesn't have he doesn't have his own intelligence agency. He has to rely on things like the FBI.
He was doing, if I'm not mistaken, there were sort of intelligence that he was doing that he was aware of that he was sharing with Democratic senators before January 6th, talking about things that he was hearing from this intelligence gathering that suggested there could be violence that day.
Hold on, wait, stop. I just want to be very clear where we're at right now. I asked for evidence that the feds were instigating this, and this has changed to somebody on a Senate committee heard suggestions that there might be some kind of violence on that day. So let me go back to the original question. Is there any evidence whatsoever that feds instigated any of this?
Well, what happens is, now I know you're used to this, Destiny, someone who's better than you, like Pisco, because he is better than you, always saving your ass, and constantly interrupting and jumping in. What I'm saying is, if they were aware, listen, I'll answer this in 30 seconds. If they were aware that this stuff was likely to happen and testify to it later, and they did not share that information through the proper sources, only did the bare minimum, to the point where the person tasked with defense, Capitol Chief Sund, said he was shocked at how he got less preparation and less intelligence sharing for this than even normal protests that would occur at the Capitol, then yes, it would show the only explanation is they're incredibly derelict because they knew there was about to be a coup to overthrow the government, but didn't share the information sufficiently with the people tasked with defense, or they wanted it to happen.
Sure. And then what is your strongest piece of evidence that they had a really good idea that this was going to happen?
you could go to the trials of the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, and the communications they had
I've
when they used
all the
this
indictments
evidence.
and everything. I've seen like articles about the convictions, but
Yes.
so are you saying that in these trials, what do they testify to?
They had quotes specifically that they said that they had. They specifically said that they had human intelligence assets, or people, I forget the specific term they used, but basically people that were cooperating with the FBI, that was routinely contacting the FBI, that was giving them these quotes that were then used as quotes in the trials of these people to suggest that there was pre-planning of basically an coup or pre-planning of an attack on the Capitol. So if they had these quotes, what's that? Yeah,
so,
track
but
down
to
the
be
quotes.
clear, I don't think any of this is true. I think you're literally inventing all of this.
Well, I disagree, Destiny.
Destiny, we'll have to leave it there. I really appreciate everyone. Listen, I know that there were some bumps along the road. We're trying to keep it a little bit more calibrated next time. I appreciate Rob, by the way. Speaking, I like it when Destiny and Rob get into it. But yeah,
we've been friends for years, right, Pisco? That's why you defended me on the Rage Quit thing, because we've been. I said we've been friends for years secretly, right, Destiny?
Yes, we went to high school together, and we actually were in-laws, in fact, according to Destiny. No, I'm just kidding. Listen. Thank you so much, Destiny. I appreciate you hosting this. And again, we'll try to do more space in the future.
Oh, fun. Didn't do that live because I didn't know if I would get in on the show, but always fun to needle Pisco and Destiny. I really wanted to get to that point. Look, you can see sort of the absurdity. January 6th stuff aside, when we're talking about like there's riots occurring in real time at BLM, and he's like, oh, of course, private property, that's too much, but rioting's the other side of the coin to voting. Well, what I was saying, bullshit, man. You're making excuses for it. That's what you're doing. And the idea that like, I'm sorry, I know that I'm biased and I'm partisan, which is true. Like, I get that. Almost everyone is. In fact, everyone is to some degree. But I'm sorry, like the idea that, well, Trump should have sent the National Guard in against the wishes. It's his fault for not sending in. Yeah, I can say that. But fuck you if you don't think that the Democrats wouldn't have been like, oh, what an authoritarian. Oh my God, he's a fascist. Like, please. And that's the overarching point that I'm trying to make. Again, the reason I called into that space was the idea that space was about, I forget what the name of it was specifically. Do I have it? Republicans have zero standards for behavior. The Democrats constantly, they're the ones that make a big deal about Trump, his rhetoric, it causes all this violence, blah, blah, blah. We're seeing assassination attempts against Trump. All I'm suggesting is they be held to the same standard that they hold other people to. You think for a second if Trump would have promoted a bail fund for the January 6 people the day after January 6, that Destiny, Pisco, and the rest of them wouldn't have been like, oh my God, this is proof that he wanted that to happen. But when Kamala Harris does it, well, she just meant the peaceful people. And they constantly talk about, oh, what's in people's heads. I agree. It's something that I do often. I say, this is what I assume they were doing, or I think they were doing. I can't read their minds, but I'm going with the best available evidence to be able to say that. I'm not the one saying the literal words that people are saying isn't what they mean because I could read their mind. Such as when Trump says, go be peaceful, and people like Destiny and Pisco go, clearly he meant go be violent. Or with Pisco when Jabal Bowman said, I didn't intend for the alarm to go off. Pisco's like, I don't think that's a lie because I think he meant he did intend for the alarm to go off. So again, it's interesting how they tried to turn that. Now, I also like that platform. That's good. Bring on Pisco, Josiah, Destiny. See if they can get 15, 20 more people. They'll need that and more to take me on. So notice how the tone changes too when I come on because they know that I'll bring receipts and that they can't bully me with these like sort of, rapid fire questions that'll get me confused like they're trying to do if you watch some of the other people in that space. Ain't gonna work with me. I'm used to the tactics. I'm used to the 20-on-1, so it doesn't bother me. Anyways, don't wish any harm or any ill will towards Destiny and Pisco. I actually like interacting with them. So hope you like this little video. I'll try to get it uploaded soon. Sorry it wasn't live, but like I said, I didn't know if I'd get on the show or not. So thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy this.